So we're constantly hearing about invasive plants, right? These botanical newcomers that can just take over.
Yeah, the ones that outcompete native species. It's usually framed as a big problem.
Exactly. But what if? What if we flip that idea? What if some of these, invaders actually hold hidden value, especially for our health?
That's this whole concept of invasive medicine. It's fascinating. The idea that these plants we label as bad might be, well, sources of food or medicine.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If maybe
Yeah.
our view of nature is a bit, I don't know, narrow.
And what's really interesting is this potential link, maybe, between times of widespread illness, like pandemics or bad flu seasons, and the abundance of these specific plants.
You mean like nature providing solutions right when we need them, just maybe not where we expect?
Kinda, yeah. It challenges how we see things, how we interact with the environment around us.
Okay, so today let's really dive deep into one specific example. Icetis tinctoria, Dyer's Woad.
Ah, yes, Dyer's Woad. Infamous for being invasive. It's a champion seed producer, that one. Land managers often target it, try to get rid of it.
But it also has these pretty remarkable medicinal properties, especially for respiratory infections, apparently.
Exactly. So here's this plant we're actively trying to wipe out, and it might actually be a powerful ally for, breathing easier.
It's a perfect illustration of this invasive medicine idea, seen as a nuisance, yet TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and some herbalists see it as valuable.
Which really brings up the question, is it practical? Spending all these resources, time, maybe even using potentially toxic stuff to eradicate plants that could actually help us.
That's a perspective you hear from people like Sam Coffman, right? Founder of Herbal Medics Academy.
Right. He brings a really grounded, practical viewpoint to using these things that are just readily available.
Okay, so for this deep dive, our mission is pretty clear. We're going to explore the medicinal side of Dyer's Woad, using our research, looking at traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, and also, Western perspectives.
Sounds good. And maybe starting with Sam Coffman's background makes sense, given his perspective.
Yeah, tell us a bit about him. His expertise seems, well, pretty broad.
Oh, it really is. He's been working with herbs since, 1987, founded Herbal Medics Academy. His practical experience is huge, like 6 years as a Special Forces medic, a Green Beret during his 10 years in the Army.
Wow, a Green Beret medic. Okay.
Yeah. Plus, he's a registered herbalist with the American Herbalists Guild, a wilderness EMT, teaches wilderness first responder courses.
Oh, and he has a master's in acupuncture and oriental medicine.
So formal TCM training, too.
Absolutely. And even a BA in linguistics, interestingly. It's this unique mix, military medicine, deep herbal knowledge, TCM. It all points to a very practical way of looking at things, like using invasive plants.
That's an incredible combination. And he's not just stuck in the past, right? He's involved with tech, too.
Yeah, he's the AI director at Herbal Medics Academy. So he's actually integrating his medical knowledge with modern tech, building AI tools for herbalism education.
Interesting. And he writes books, too. Yep. Herbal Medic, Survival Gardening. And he's got a post-apocalyptic series coming out, Collapse Horizon. Seems like he thinks a lot about resilience in all sorts of ways.
Okay, so that practical, resilience-focused mindset definitely informs his view on invasive plants.
Totally. He questions the logic, Why spend so much fighting these plants when they could be resources for health, even food? And what's key is how he weaves together TCM ideas with Western botanical knowledge and functional medicine. It gives a really holistic picture.
Right. So back to Dyer's Woad, Icetis tinctoria. Given that practical angle, why focus on this one? It sounds like it spreads like crazy.
Oh, it does. It's incredibly prolific, makes tons of seeds. They germinate super easily. Yeah, it can be a really aggressive invader in a lot of places.
Yeah.
But despite that reputation, it's a seriously potent medicine, especially, as you mentioned, for respiratory tract infections.
That's such a contrast. A plant we're battling could help us breathe better.
Precisely. And what's interesting is you don't hear about it that much in Western herbalism compared to, say, echinacea. Some folks know it, sure, but it's not a household name.
But in TCM.
In traditional Chinese medicine, it's a completely different story. It has a really long, solid history of use in China.
Why do you think that disconnect exists? Is it just the invasive label scaring Western herbalists off, or something else?
That's a good question. Maybe the label does overshadow things, but yeah, in TCM, it's a well-respected player, even if it's less known over here.
Okay. And in TCM, they use different parts, right? It's not just Dyer's Woad.
Exactly. They actually use multiple Icetis species, and they have different names depending on the part. The leaf is commonly called Dakingye.
Dakingye meaning?
Big green leaf, basically. And the root is known as Banlan Gen.
Banlangen for the root. Got it.
And both parts, leaf and root, are recognized in TCM for their therapeutic properties. It highlights how different parts of the same plant can have different jobs. Something we should probably think about more with herbs generally.
So the names tell you what part you're dealing with. What's the core idea in TCM behind using Dyer's Woad? What's it doing?
The main concept is clearing toxic heat.
Toxic heat. Okay, what does that mean in practical terms?
Think of infections. In TCM, they're often seen as this buildup of heat and imbalance in the body. Clearing toxic heat is about tackling that imbalance, that inflammation, not just masking symptoms.
So it's for acute infections, viral, bacterial.
Yes, exactly. Acute stuff. It's about resolving those intense inflammatory responses. And Dyer's Woad, both leaf and root, are seen as having similar energetic qualities in TCM to do just that, even for pretty severe cases.
Clearing toxic heat sounds like exactly what you need when you're fighting something nasty. How does that translate therapeutically, especially for those respiratory infections we keep mentioning?
Well, this is where it gets really practical. Both TCM tradition and, anecdotal reports strongly suggest it's particularly good for the lungs and the whole respiratory tract.
Like colds and flu.
Colds, flu, yeah. Viral upper respiratory infections, even potentially things like COVID-19. But it's not just viruses, it's also considered helpful for bacterial stuff like strep throat.
Strep throat, too. What about sinus infections? Those can be tough.
Yes, even those stubborn, persistent sinus infections. There's actually a suggestion, this is interesting, that it might have biofilm busting capabilities.
Biofilm busting, like breaking down the protective slime bacteria build.
Kind of like that, yeah. Think of biofilm as a sticky fort bacteria hide in, protecting them from antibiotics or our immune system. If Dyer's Woad can disrupt that, well, that could explain why it might work on those infections that just hang around.
That is interesting. Makes sense for persistent issues.
And its ability to clear toxic heat is strong enough that it gets compared sometimes to echinacea and gustifolia, another big hitter for immune support.
Okay, so it's got quite the reputation for respiratory stuff. Now, you mentioned the leaf, the King-Yes, and the root, Banlangen. Is one better than the other for coughs and colds?
That's a key point. While the root, Banlangen, definitely has its uses, and some Western herbalists do use it, the general consensus, especially from the TCM angle, seems to favor the leaf, that King-Ye.
The leaf is the go-to for respiratory.
Particularly for respiratory issues, and especially for viral infections, yes, the leaf seems to be preferred.
So if you're dealing with that kind of stuff, focus mainly on the leaf. Is there a suggested ratio if you use both?
Yeah, actually, Stephen Bunner, who was a really well-respected herbalist, suggested a ratio leaning heavily towards the leaf, something like 75% leaf to 25% root for respiratory problems.
75-25 leaf to root.
Okay. It reflects that TCM understanding that the leaf has a special affinity for the lungs in these situations.
All right, so we've got our leaves, maybe a bit of root. How do we actually prepare it to get the most benefit? Are there specific tricks to harvesting or extracting Dyer's Woad?
Absolutely. And this is where some of the traditional TCM knowledge offers really valuable insights, which might differ from standard Western approaches. First, big point. Dried Isatis tinctoria is considered way more potent than fresh.
Dried is better, not fresh. That's important.
Yep. So proper drying is step one.
And how should we dry it? Just hang it up at room temperature?
Actually, no. Interestingly, the recommendation is to dry it at a higher temperature, around 100 to 105 degrees Fahrenheit, so like 38 to 40 Celsius.
Higher temp. Why is that?
It seems to align with traditional sun-drying methods used in TCM.
Yeah.
The sources suggest Western herbalists don't usually do this, preferring slower, cooler drying. But using a food dehydrator works well to hit that temp range. The idea is it might preserve or even enhance the good stuff in the plant.
Okay, high temp, drying in a dehydrator. Got it. Then what? Extraction time, tincture, tea, something else.
For Dyer's Woad, the strong recommendation is for a multifractional extraction.
Multifractional, meaning?
Using more than one solvent, basically, to pull out a wider range of compounds. The crucial first step is a water extraction, a decoction. But here's the key. You want a low pH, an acidic environment during this water simmer. Aim for around pH 5.5 or even lower.
Acidic water. How do you do that?
It's actually easy. Just add a little apple cider vinegar to your filtered or distilled water, maybe a tablespoon per quart, something like that. Then you gently simmer the dried herb in that acidified water.
So the vinegar helps pull out certain things.
That's the idea. Helps extract specific water-soluble bits more effectively. Then, after the water decoction, the next step is an alcohol rinse or percolation.
Alcohol next, okay.
Yeah, that pulls out other compounds that like alcohol better. And doing this helps you end up with a final extract that's maybe around 30% alcohol, which is good for preserving it, making it shelf stable.
Wow, okay. Water decoction with vinegar, then alcohol. That's definitely more involved than just making a simple tincture.
It is more involved, yeah. But the thinking is this multi-stage process gives you a much better quality, more potent extract than just alcohol alone. TCM's focus on this really highlights how complex these plants are, doesn't it? Different compounds needing different methods.
It really does. Anything else for preparation?
One more useful tip. Consider adding about 10 to 15% glycerin during that initial water decoction phase.
Glycerin. Why?
It apparently helps stop things from precipitating out, settling out of the liquid over time, helps keep the final extract stable.
Glycerin for stability? Okay. It sounds like quite the process to get the best Dyer's Woad medicine. Now, important question. Any downsides? Side effects, precautions?
Yes, definitely need to be aware. Isatis tinctoria is generally considered an herb with medium toxicity.
Medium toxicity,
meaning while it's generally safe if you use it correctly for shorter periods, using it for a long time or taking really high doses, well, it could potentially cause some digestive upset for some people.
Stomach issues.
Yeah, potentially. And like any plant, some individuals might just be sensitive to it.
So moderation is key. Listen to your body.
Exactly. And the other strong recommendation is to use Dyer's Woad as part of a formula with other herbs, not just on its own as a single treatment, especially if you're thinking of using it for more than just a few days.
Combine it with other herbs. Why is that?
It helps balance its effects, potentially reduces any risks, and often herbs just work better together synergistically anyway.
Makes sense. Safety first. Okay, one last thing.
Yeah.
The name. Dyer's Woad. That sounds pretty specific.
It is. It points right to its other major use. It's called Dyer's Woad because historically, and even today, it's a really important source of a strong, beautiful indigo dye.
Indigo dye? From the
leaves, yeah. That vibrant blue color. It's been used for centuries to dye cloth textiles. So this plant is kind of amazing, potent medicine and a source of natural color.
Wow. So this invasive weed has this deep history and multiple uses. It really does make you think differently about how we label things in nature.
Absolutely. That whole invasive medicine idea really challenges our neat little categories, doesn't it? It pushes us to look past the label, see the potential benefits these plants might offer, especially for our health.
So let's recap this deep dive on Isatis tinctoria. We've got this plant, super invasive, but with a long TCM history for medicine.
Right, especially for respiratory health, using that clearing toxic heat principle.
And the key takeaways on using it seem to be dried is better than fresh. Use that higher temp drying.
And that multifractional extraction, the acidic water decoction followed by alcohol, maybe with some glycerin.
Plus, remember, it's medium toxicity, so use it wisely, preferably in formula. And hey, it makes blue dye.
Exactly. And what's really compelling is just the core idea. A plant targeted for eradication could actually be a valuable medicine, especially for common things like coughs, colds, and sinus issues. TCM offers so much insight here that maybe isn't fully tapped into in the West yet.
It's been incredibly insightful. Really makes you wonder, what else is out there that we're just dismissing as a weed?
And that brings up a thought for you, the listener. Have you ever really looked at the plants growing right around you, even the ones people call weeds or invasives? Maybe. Maybe it's worth investigating a bit more. Cautiously, of course, proper identification and knowledge are absolutely crucial. Don't go eating random plants.
Right, safety first.
But the idea that maybe, just maybe, some answers for our well-being are growing right under our feet in plants we usually ignore or try to get rid of. That's a pretty powerful thought to chew on.
Definitely food for thought. And if you are interested in learning more properly about herbal medicine, plants like Dyer's Woad, resources like the Herbal Medics Academy or the Human Path are out there. Lots of info and courses.
Great places to continue learning.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive.